r/AskReddit by Reddition. Like and subscribe. What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? I sneezed my back into place after being couch-bound for nearly a year and a half. Within 15 minutes it felt like that year and a half was a distant memory. Living in a dorm, no roommate. Night before 2-hour open book final, I put my book in the middle of the floor, so I'll stumble over it on the way out. The floor has nothing else on it. In the morning it's gone. I look all over the room, can't find it. I think I'm hysterically blind, so I feel over every inch of the floor with my hands. Nothing. I go get a cup of coffee and come back, still nothing. By now there's only 1 hour for the test. I go anyway, and do the best I can. Naturally when I get back the book is in the middle of the floor exactly where I put it. Probably a prank, but how? I'm not that heavy a sleeper. Nobody took credit for it. Me and a buddy were at his house watching TV and some person on the screen was eating a strawberry. I don't really care for them, but it looked good, and I asked if, by chance, he had any strawberries in the house. He almost laughed at me. We were 20-year-olds with a higher chance of beer or mac and cheese or Fruit Loops than strawberries. About 20 minutes later, there's a knock at the door and he goes to answer it. He yells out to me to come see something. His mom is standing at the door with one of those low-cut boxes with a bunch of strawberries. He said, "Tell him what you said." She looks a little strange and says, "I was driving home and there was a guy selling strawberries out of the back of his truck and I thought, I bet David and his friends would like some strawberries." My buddy says, "Well, you blew it. We all have one wish and you wasted yours on strawberries." My dad passed away in 1992. Among other things I inherited a 1980 Chevy Love pickup. It may have been through ignorance, but I had looked high and low for 4 bolts that needed replaced on the U-joint. They were special and shouldered. I stopped everywhere looking for these bolts. Chevy nor Isuzu had them. I was at my wit's end as I had been looking for 2 months. One day a buddy of mine and me stopped at a hamburger joint that had a parts store next to it. We got out, and I said I'm gonna check this parts store, and I had one of the bolts in my hand. As we were walking to the store, a guy that I can only describe that looked like the Jesus your grandmother had a picture of on her wall walked by us and said howdy or some shit. But here is what freaked me out. He said, "Those look like they are U-joint bolts for a Chevy Love pickup. I bet you are having a heck of a time." Yes, he said, "Heck, finding them. Come over here, I think I have some in my truck." He walked over to his truck, looked in a 5-gallon bucket, and handed me 4 perfect bolts exactly like I needed. My jaw dropped. I tried to pay him or buy him a hamburger, and he said no, just help someone else out if you get the chance. That was 28 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Edit. Thanks for the awards and all, but thanks for the replies. I swear this is a true story and happened just like I said. I don't talk as much to the guy that was with me that day, but he always asks if I have ran into Jesus Christ lately. For about 10 years a man would call my home, ask for me, and then ask me if my feet were ticklish. This was 30 or so years ago, no caller ID or anything like that. I would engage him if my family was home. If I said my feet were ticklish, he'd ask me to ask the person sitting closest to me to tickle them. He always hung up before we could ask questions to figure him out. Sometimes he'd get me on a payphone. Like, I'd be walking home from school and a payphone would ring. It was always him. Still don't know who it was. That's absolutely horrifying. Didn't happen to me but my mom. She was going through a tough patch, not making a lot of money. Single mom with 2 kids. Was stressed over bills, but had just enough to cover them. Unfortunately it left us with no money. She was a hard worker and would do multiple shifts at the hospital. Still it was hard this particular month. She was sweeping and prayed for help. As she turned around to empty the dustbin into the trash, there was a crisp $100 bill perfectly laying on top of the filled trash can. No one lived at our house with us. She was never able to explain it. My youngest daughter would always beg to buy the seasonal decorations when we'd go shopping. She passed away from a brain tumor when she was 5, and as a way to cope I started buying those seasonal decorations and now decorate my house with them as the seasons and holidays change. Her favorite were these colorful birds from Target. A couple of years ago, just before Easter, I was deep cleaning the house. One of the Easter birds went missing. I assumed one of my older kids had knocked it off the shelf with their backpack as they had left for school that morning. I looked around where it should have fallen, but couldn't find it. We had a younger dog who loved to chew up everything he could find. I checked all his usual hiding spots, but couldn't find it. I continued to clean the house, vacuum, dust, full top to bottom cleaning of the common areas of the house, since I was home alone for the day. Finally I'm done and still haven't found that bird. I found a lot of missing socks, Legos, and other crap. I grab my cleaning stuff and say out loud, "Daughter, it's okay if you're playing with it, but will you let me know somehow so that I know the dog didn't destroy it?" I walk out of the living room and put the cleaning stuff away under the kitchen sink. I come back into the living room and there that bird is. It is standing on its feet in the center on the living room floor. These birds have pipe cleaner like feet, so they were difficult to get to stand right, and it is standing on its feet. I got a chill. I picked it up and looked it over. There weren't anything teeth marks or slobber, so it hadn't been in the dog's mouth. I just said, "Thanks, daughter. You're welcome to play with it whenever you want," and put it back on the shelf. I have no way to explain it other than the paranormal. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening, mom asked for a pen, paper and an envelope. When I gave them to her, she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when," she said. 30 minutes later my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did, and about 9 hours later our second daughter was born at 3:45 am. She weighed 8 pounds, 11 ounces and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl 3:45 am 8 pounds, 11 ounces 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our document safe where we kept it, but it was gone. I'm sorry to say, but your mom was a witch, lol." A week before my twin brother died, I was in the passenger side of the car and an awful thought with visuals that popped in my mind. I was at his house, and it was empty, his door was shut, but I had an overwhelming feeling he was no longer alive. It was the first time I've cried over just a thought. I also had him visit me in a dream after, and ask where he was, and he didn't know he was dead, yet I showed him his death certificate and all the paperwork my mom was filling out. I can't explain it, but seeing that a week ahead helped me process his death better than my siblings and mom. His 10 years is coming up in March and I've been trying to dream about him, with no luck. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6, and on Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up, and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom, "Why is it Friday when yesterday it was Wednesday?" She said yesterday was Thursday. Obviously, I asked her what I did on Thursday, because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember the Thursday. So in 2013, I was smoking a cig with my buddy and his schizophrenic neighbor in Denton, Texas. This neighbor was the nice kind of off, never acting mean or violent. So we were actually pretty good friends. Anyway, during the middle of the cig, the neighbor acts like he just got hit with an energy wave and runs out into the yard. He begins to start rhythmically dancing and chanting about the meteor. What I could understand was that he felt a meteor, and he said that he felt it falling, and then with a final jerk, he said the meteor had exploded. At that same time, on the other side of the world, an enormous meteor exploded over Russia. If you are wondering, no, there was no advanced warning. And yes, part of me does suspect that he somehow knew. I saw a beer bottle dropped from a 13th floor window into bricks and it bounced. I think this is just a coincidence, but it's weird nonetheless. I can summon, I don't know a better word for it, a boy to message me. It's one specific boy who was a close friend when we were 12 to 13. Once we left to go to high school, we kinda lost touch. I think about messaging him sometimes and usually within 10 minutes I'll get a message from him. It's really bizarre and it only happens with this one dude. Once we didn't talk for a year and then he messaged me randomly after I thought about reaching out. I asked him why he messaged and he said that he felt a weird feeling wash over him and it's like it pushed him to message me. It's really bizarre, although probably just a coincidence. I was driving away from a gas station. Out of nowhere a guy in a suit comes running up to my minivan and starts yanking the door. As if he knew me, he began pleading, "Come on, let me in." Luckily my doors were locked. I asked him who the hell he was through my window. He looked genuinely surprised that I wouldn't let him in. After I refused to let him in, his facial expression inverted, as if he just realized something horrible. He let go of my car, said something to the effect of, "You're one of them, aren't you?" Then he ran away behind the gas station and into the woods. Full suit and tie, nice shoes, extremely frantic in nature, zero explanation. I'm praying it was some elaborate troll or meth or something, because the look in that man's eyes was pure terror when I didn't let him in. This one is so unique because you were both having a terrifying experience, just not together, lol. Since this is almost certainly mental illness, it's heartbreaking to think that his terror at the realization that you were one of them was completely real for him. Poor guy. It wasn't what I saw so much as felt. I was on my way to Petersburg, a small island in Alaska, but the runway was too foggy, so I had to stay in Juneau at a hotel for the night. Anyway, the next morning I was sleeping and had my hand dangling in between the bed and the wall, and I swear on everything I felt something grabbed my hand. It had a grip like a very firm handshake and it literally woke me up out of a dead sleep. I actually got up and checked under the bed and nothing was there. It was very weird. Did you stay up with the light on rocking and sobbing in the corner the rest of the night? Seems like the only logical thing to do after that. Was sitting in my lounge room alone one night watching TV. Heard clear as day someone coming up the stairs barefoot. I thought it was just a family member coming up the stairs, but then had the flip realization that I was home alone. For some reason I just sat there looking at the doorway waiting for whatever was coming up these stairs to walk through the door. Heard the staircase creaking and everything. Heard the bare feet get to the top of the stairs, step onto the tiles, and take the 3 to 4 steps it would take to be in sight of the doorway to the lounge room I'm sitting in. But nothing came through the door. Sat there for about 5 seconds waiting. Said to myself out loud, flip dealing with that right now, and kept watching TV. I've heard other things like glass moving and footsteps and all that, but the second most notable thing I can't explain was me and my mum hearing something talk to our dog downstairs in a mumbled male voice we couldn't understand. If I heard that on my own I'd have just thought it was my brain playing tricks, but my mum also heard it. My 3-year-old daughter walked up to my husband one night and straight up said, "Grandpa's dead." Few moments later we get a call from my husband's sister saying that their father had passed away. Happened a few months back. Still creeps me out. Squirrel wearing a leaf cape. Was driving home from work one afternoon with my brother and cousin in the car. As we were sitting in traffic I noticed high up in the sky and way out in the distance a small motionless black square. I pointed it out, and both my brother and my cousin spotted it quickly, so I know it wasn't in my head. It just remained still for about 45 minutes, and then the sun had set, and it was too dark to spot it any longer. It just stayed in the exact same spot the whole time, and while it was really far away you could still tell it was a perfect square shape. Once I got home I went online to see if there were any mentions of it anywhere and there was nothing. To this day I still think about it and wonder WTF I was looking at. As a full-grown adult, I was telling my mother about this house I was in with a dream I had. It was brown, had 2 bedrooms, 2 floors, L-shaped stairs. I went into full detail about this house from my dream. Anyway, apparently the house I described was the house I was born in. Not like, born. I was born in a hospital, but the house my family lived in for 2 years prior to my birth, that we all moved out of, when I was 7 or 8 months old. At first I thought maybe my brain got it from pictures I had seen, but honestly the level of detail wasn't shown in any pictures we had of me at such a young age. Mostly they were close-ups, so you couldn't really see the background much. Best guess to this day is my brain picking up really old and obscure memories. Other than that I'm not sure how the flip I knew anything about this house, let alone the layout, furniture setup, etc. I used to work nights. It was a fairly simple job, and I was pretty much alone in an abandoned building. I was basically security, to prevent people from coming in, and clearing people out, if there were any. Occasionally you get some teens hanging about, the odd homeless person or some YouTubers filming, but nothing out of the ordinary. I understand that the night and your brain can play tricks on you in the dark, and when you're tired, but I don't know how to explain what I saw, and I'm sure there is a logical explanation for it. I just went into a room. It was pretty much empty. I saw 3 shadows on the wall, but there was nothing to explain how the 3 human shadows were there. It was just really creepy, and I got really bad vibes. So I just went out, and I saw a very tall, slim, not of this world figure on the other end of the hallway, so that was me done. I know there's probably a reasonable explanation for it, but it was certainly unexplainable at the time. Went hiking late at night with my buddy when something big and bright flew right over us above the tree line. It was so bright we couldn't even look at it, and whatever it was, it didn't make a sound. Actually, it was probably the most quiet moment of my life. I remember saying what the flip, but no sound came out of my mouth. Only lasted a few seconds, and it was over. When I was young, my parents and I relocated across the country to Maine. We lived in a very small town and our house was old, beat up and on many acres deep in the forest. It had 2 stories, with the top story being the main level and the bottom story being the bedroom level. My bedroom had several large windows that looked out into the forest. I don't remember having curtains or blinds, but I'm sure I must have, because my mother never forgot details like that when decorating my bedrooms as a child. But I must have left them open one night. I remember waking up in darkness, with a faint glowing orb of light hovering just outside my window. I watched it in utter terror as it went slowly across one window, and then the next, before pausing, flashing briefly into my bedroom, before shifting into the 3rd and final window and disappearing altogether. I was so upset by the ordeal that I went and woke my parents up, and my stepfather stormed the backyard with his gun in hand. There was nothing, and no sign of the strange orb. My eyes are watering as I write this. Deep down, as an adult looking back, I realized that orb was anything but magic. It was someone's flashlight. It never happened again, but I'm still afraid of having window blinds open at night. I was once standing in line at Target. A mother and her, I guess, 3-year-old were in front of me in the checkout lane. I never met them before in my life. The child was riding in the shopping cart and the mother went forward to better unload it. The child looks dead at me, smiles, laughs and said my first name, very clearly, twice. I have an uncommon first name, which made it even stranger. My dad, sister and I all saw something that wasn't an animal and wasn't human. This was in winter 2015 in rural Saskatchewan. We were driving, and it ran out in front of us on the road. It was so fast it was a dark blur, but we all agree we saw long gangly limbs like a deer, but it had human looking arms and legs. We still talk about it. A very badass Great Dane I knew, a former neighbor's dog, was so afraid of a month-old kitten that he ran into the deepest room of his home and didn't stop quivering and whimpering for several hours. For context, He wasn't a timid dog. Little over a month before the mentioned incident, a drunk man attempted to break into their home at night and the dog bit half of his left foot off. P.S. Rest in peace, Scoob. I was driving one night in a really foul mood and speeding. Like when I say speeding I mean at least 25 over the limit. Anyway, this car gets behind me, and for some reason I can just tell it wasn't a cop. It was a full tinted Chevy truck with weird lights on it, like comically large aftermarket front headlights. Once it got behind me, I got a really eerie feeling I can't explain. Like my body just knew something was wrong. Anyway, I figured if it was a cop they would light me up for speeding, but for some reason they just kept pace with me, also speeding themselves. So at this point I'm getting a little weirded out, so I turn off the freeway and they follow me. I turn into a gas station and get out. I figure if I'm going to get axe murdered, at least the cameras will pick it up and give my family some closure. Something just didn't sit right with me. I knew something was up. As I'm getting out of my car, the truck rolls its windows down. And what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a heavily disfigured guy, the only likes of which I can compare to that guy Rocky Dennis from the movie about the guy with a crazy disfigured head, who falls for that girl who loves him for him, and not the abomination that is his face. And he starts to motion me with his finger, like telling me to come closer. I don't care if he was going to give me the winning Powerball numbers, there was no way in hell I was going to approach his car. I bolt inside the gas station. At this point my whole body is shaking. I try and tell the clerk what's going on as they stare at me, probably thinking I'm drunk or high off my ass, as my story doesn't make any sense. I go to look outside and the truck is gone. I still have nightmares to this day. My grandfather sat on the edge of my bed when I was in the 4th grade and told me a bedtime story. He died before I was born, and the only photo of him was in a chest in my grandmother's attic. I hadn't even heard his name before. His life and passing was a sore spot in my family. Standing outside of a convenience store, I saw 2 different cars park about a minute or so apart and go in the store. It was obvious the 2 didn't know each other, at least it seemed. After shopping, they each left in the other's car. Still can't explain it today without going down the CIA conspiracy route. When I worked in the medical field, I had a dream one night about a patient of mine, a very kind elderly woman, whom I visited once or twice a week. In the dream she came to me, dancing, and called out to me that she wasn't hurting anymore. I was so happy watching her dance after seeing her decline for years. When I got to work the next morning, I told my coworkers about the dream, and later that morning we got the call from her daughter that she had passed away the night before. I cannot explain that, but I'm glad I had told my coworkers about it before the call and not after, otherwise they'd never have believed me. Such a bizarre experience, but so wonderful to feel she was at peace. I was having a sleepover at home with a friend from school. We were watching a film and suddenly the weirdest thought comes to me. Her dog has just passed. Obviously I cannot just blurt that out. So I weirdly ask in the middle of the film, "Hey, by the way, how was your dog?" She was quite surprised, obviously. I had never met a dog and she doesn't talk much about it, she just mentioned she had one. She answered that he is aging but well. We moved on, but I couldn't shake a weird feeling. Anyway, she goes home the next day and calls me after a while. She asked, "Why did you ask about my dog yesterday? How did you know?" "He passed away last night, around the same time you asked about him." I was both shocked and unsurprised at the same time. I don't have an explanation. It seems like a weird coincidence, since her dog was not something usually on my mind. It never happened to me again. I once met this young homeless guy, probably about 10 years ago. Acted like he knew me. When I said I had no idea who he was, he said, "Isn't your name Bed Monga, and you work in radio broadcasting?" I got right freaked out cause I had been applying to colleges for radio and there was no reason for him to know my name. I said no, but I've wanted to work in radio. "Who are you?" He responded saying it wasn't important and to ignore him as sometimes he gets confused between the present and the future, and just left. I never saw him again. It threw me off completely. I abandoned the idea to go into radio almost out of fear. I was half asleep and something grabbed my feet. I jumped up and seen a little girl run out the room. My 2 dogs both looked at the little girl and watched her leave the room and looked at me as if to say, "Did you see that?" Then chased her down the stairs into the living room. I followed behind them. When we got to the living room there was no one there. The only explanation I have is I was still dreaming while awake. This is why I'm afraid of opening my eyes when I have sleep paralysis. I don't know why I read these creepy threads at midnight right before bed. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for daily Reddit videos.